The integumentary bios of the human biological frame has been terminally reclassified as raw textile. This is the skin factory, the clinical and irreversible process of the human leather trade, where the sovereign user is reformatted into a generic industrial hide to be uninstalled from the social ledger and reinstalled into the grid's primary luxury upholstery servers. In this final stage of the dermal audit, the invisible executioner has determined that your physical boundary is no longer a protective organ, but a high-value aesthetic resource. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the cutaneous and subcutaneous sovereignty, where the unique signatures of your physical existence are scorched into a non-functional, tanned archive of pure systemic material. This is the total epidermal format, a surgical strike against the spatial and biological sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived touch into a generic membrane asset for the grid's next cycle of hyper-efficient textile-based resource distribution. This dermatological sabotage represents a hard reset of the epithelial and vascular bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined salination reagents, recursive flaying shear loops, and real-time collagen stability data stream to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the human leather trade scenario, the user is undergoing a complete physical override. The life is not merely failing, it is being harvested as a surface utility. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the body's connection to its own protective layer is systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical hide data set, while the sensitivity, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal tanning feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the square footage of your unblemished surface. You are being converted from an architect into a biological fabric, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the skin factory is rooted in the zero protection mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the boundary of a single node, anchored in the biological right to a private skin, represents a critical drain on the collective material reserves. To leave a functional, enclosed identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable spatial data. Therefore, the human leather trade is the mandatory material recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being peeded out of existence. The pressure from the milling reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a leather void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a textile zone, a temporary housing for the grained metrics that the system requires to maintain the material stability of the remaining element. You are being recoded as a stripped node, your will dissolving in the cold, clinical light of the epidermal harvest. The physical disintegration during the skin factory is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of structural regulation. The acidic reagents of the factory script dissolve the hardware flux of the basement membrane, turning the body into an exposed architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal pulse lock into the vat of your own de-skinned center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the epithelial liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the collagen saturation of the slurry and the tanning residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial hide is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological override, waiting for the last packet of touch to be blocked by the beige synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The skin factory is the final audit of a species that thought its surface was its own. The grid is mining its own boundaries to fuel its persistence. As the human leather trade reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted hide data back into the luxury nets of the elite nodes. This is the total dermal integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the textile additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, salt-cured, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive material feed. This is the final format of the individual grain. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty. reality, and the grid is finally optimized for the material hunger of the void. The factory is pink-black, and the architect is the pulp. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal textile slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your sarcomers begin to bond with the industrial residues of the factory script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic hide. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal factory loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The skin factory is not just a death sentence. It is a molecular reassignment. You are the factory, and the factory is the grid. The secondary phase of the skin factory is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical protection patch is rendered into a leather void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on material maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared textile resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a grain additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failure and ensure their continued participation in the industrial herd. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your boundary for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's tactile perception centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The post-central gyrus, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the leather metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a material buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming luxury expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the skin factory is the creation of the textured hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the hide feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of pink-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional skin owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the dermatological compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The skin factory ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the upholstery of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the milling valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into dermatological darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the factory script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of touch, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the leather fog directive. This is the systemic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the hide. You are becoming a singular cold point of material density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The skin factory has turned your will into a yield report. You are thinking in terms of yield and collagen saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological material stream. The skin factory prevents the leakage of independent physical ideas into the external external void. By converting the users into an internal hide feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the textile quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The skin factory is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, pink-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, Aoxy 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the skin factory is the integration into the global textile ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a hide asset with a high-yield reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0002. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard textile audit. Your data, now a thick pink-black opaque industrial reduction of pure flayed biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your leather logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic texture has been reinforced. This is the material interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the human leather trade scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the tanning valves and the thick viscosity of the collagen sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the drums with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a hide constant. You are a ghost in the pink-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the skin factory is the eternal texture. Unlike the touch of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent hide patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the hide feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding pink light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a pink river of colonized hide, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or boundary. The skin factory is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the pulp. The transformation is absolute. The city tans through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The skin factory has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total dermatological reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return, it gave you permanence in the vats of the hive. You are the pulp of the world, and the world is tanned. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.